This way, my lords. Abbess Helen's commanding voice sounded in the corridor outside the dormitory. The smooth wood of the floor was cool on Lizzie's cheek as she held herself still and breathless, listening. All is well with the girls, I assure you. We've taken good care of them. We will need to see for ourselves. A man's voice answered in French, low and harsh. Are you sure they are who you say they are? I find it hard to believe they could have been here all this time and we didn't know it. The abbess sounded more put out than worried. If these men had told her the sisters' real identities, she would feel affronted that she'd been lied to all this time. We are sure. The vindictive part of Lizzie hoped the abbess was going over in her mind all the times she'd striped Lizzie's palm, deprived her of meals, or locked her in a closet. To be fair, Lizzie had sometimes deserved her punishments. Even more, that the abbess had been fooled wasn't her fault. While the old abbess had known the truth, she had died within a year of the girl's arrival at St. Margaret's. With her demise, the only people who could attest that 3 princesses lived at St. Margaret's were Gilbert de Clare, the man who'd hidden them there, and the 3 princesses themselves. Or so they had all thought until tonight. Lizzie remembered well the urgency with which Earl Gilbert had spirited them away from their old convent of Amesbury after their grandmother's death. He had indelibly impressed upon each of the sisters the need for secrecy, a secrecy they'd maintained without exception all this time, even after Earl Gilbert had died too. Maybe especially after. Up until a few moments earlier, Lizzie had been curled up at the foot of her sister's bed. At the sound of the men's heavy footsteps coming up the stairs, she'd been startled upright, moving in an instant from almost asleep to wide awake. That sounds like men. Daisy had sat up too, pushing out of her face stray strands of light brown hair that had come loose from her long braid. Go, Lizzie. Then she'd squeeze Lizzie's hand once, shooing her off the bed and onto the floor beneath it. Hide. For once, do as you're told. This had come from Molly, Lizzie's other sister, who was almost exactly 3 years younger than Daisy, as they were both born in March. That made her 17, Daisy 20, and Lizzie 13. Unlike Daisy and Lizzie, Molly had entered the convent with some degree of willingness, having been promised to it from the age of 6. All these years later, she barely remembered anything else. In truth, Lizzie herself barely remembered anything of that former life, beyond a few vague memories. Her mother's scent, perhaps, though that could have come from another woman who cared for her. She didn't remember the funeral of her brother, Alfonso, when she was 2 years old. She did remember her parents' deaths in Lancaster the next year. She'd been 3 when they died, and her grandmother, the Dowager Queen Eleanor, had moved all the girls to the convent at Amesbury, to which she herself retired in order to keep an eye on them. Until someone finally explained to Lizzie where Lancaster was, she had thought it some far-off, unreachable place, like France. Though Lizzie hadn't known anything about where her parents had died, her grandmother had made sure she'd known, from the moment she could listen and understand, how they'd died. Queen Marged had poisoned Lizzie's parents so David could take the throne from Lizzie's father without opposition. Fear a tangible knot in her throat, Lizzie scooted away along the floor, under the adjacent beds and towards the far wall and a better hiding place. Even if these men were friends of Earl Gilbert instead of sent by the king, making Lizzie entirely wrong about what was happening, she didn't want to be punished, again, for being outside her own dormitory chamber at night. Her backside still hurt from the beating she'd received earlier that day for being late to the Holy Office.